Well, I'd have been against it, but they're back. Mark and Mike. It doesn't take a genius.
Well, that was interesting. Good morning, Mr. Ramsey.
How are you, sir?
Doing fantastic, doing fantastic. I know you had some quality windshield time, so you were out driving around. And as we know, with men, there's two places where we do our best thinking is on the riding mower and when the windshield is in front of us. So, uh, what were your thoughts this week? What was on your mind?
Well, two things really. The first is we've all forgotten how to drive because I passed about 5 different wrecks in the rain and had extra windshield time as a result, frankly. But the other thing I was thinking about is just how often the word empathy keeps showing up in business literature, in the news, on social media. And
Every time I hear that word empathy, I think I have to care.
right,
What's up with that?
right.
That's a
Well, and I
lot.
exactly, and I think we're, we've talked about this a little bit before. I think we all have a little bit of empathy fatigue. I think we're all kind of tired of feeling other people's feelings, and that's probably not healthy to have empathy fatigue. But it dawned on me that there are some real real opportunities with empathy, as well as some dangers. So I thought we could talk about empathy just from the perspective of the good and the bad.
All right, so tell me a story that brought this to light to you. I think you were talking about a service advisor or something.
Was I, Mike?
Yeah,
I
the
yeah.
service
So you're right,
advisor. Yes,
Mike. I'd forgotten about that. I will totally tell you that story. That
that's
you're
why
so good.
I'm here is to remember your awesomeness. That's my whole point of being is go. Ramsey told me an awesome story that really resonated with me. I better remind him of it before he
I'm
forgets.
so glad you did. Oh, that's pitiful. Yeah. So it's a phenomenal story. The service advisor got chewed out by a customer. Now, this happens on a fairly regular basis because people are fairly demanding in our day and age about what they expect out of anybody that they're giving money to, anybody that they're a customer of. And at a car dealership, it can get pretty rough because there's a lot of things outside of the dealership's control. That shouldn't be an excuse, but a lot of times there are just a lot of extenuating circumstances. Well, no surprise, coronavirus is a huge extenuating circumstance. And this gentleman blessed out one of the top service advisors I've ever worked with. She has, you and I have talked about food people, one of your phrases. She gets food brought to her by customers all the time. Why? Not to bribe her into doing anything. It's not like we live in, communist China and you have to bribe people. These people do it because they really appreciate her and just bring her food. Discretionary effort. This guy didn't bring her any food. He just blessed her out. He said, listen, you've had my car a month. Do you think that's acceptable? And she paused and took a breath and said, well, I'm going to be honest with you. I do think it's acceptable. And I'm going to explain to you all the circumstances, parts on back order that the dealership just can't get. They were basically taking care of a lot of essential workers' vehicles all through the shutdown. They never closed. And, she walked through the logic of it. And then she basically said, and I'm going to be honest with you, I'm stretched pretty thin right now. And I would just ask for a little bit of grace from you because I have been working nonstop trying to take care of a lot of people in your situation. So yeah, I guess I do think it is acceptable and I need your help. And of course, the man saw it from her shoes, right? And he immediately folded and said, you're absolutely right. I apologize for blowing up on you. I'm feeling a little brittle today. And the entire situation was saved, frankly, just by her getting a little vulnerable and saying, here's what it's like in my shoes, and giving him a chance to see that. So, in that sense, empathy worked. Empathy worked.
Right. Well, and that's such a wonderful example of being true to yourself. All right. And we talk a little bit about vulnerability, and vulnerability is trusting someone with something that they could use to hurt you with.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
she trusted this person with here's my story, here's what's going on, knowing that the customer could just say, I don't care, and,
Right.
and escalate, but the fact that there was an exchange of empathy there, it worked out for the best. And I can only imagine that the relationship between the customer and the provider is even stronger than it was before the exchange.
That's it. That's it. Right. Because this has built a bond by doing this, because we both exposed humanity to each other. Right. And we're fellow human beings on the path. The other thing about that is, you and I had the privilege of hearing Donna Hicks, the scholar who worked in conflict management and went on to write Leading with Dignity. Some work we did with Ford Motor Company allowed us to hear her speak. And she talks about an element of dignity, of really showing somebody else that you think they're worth something, showing them that they matter, that they count, honoring their dignity. One of the elements of that is just that acknowledgement, just giving them your full attention, listening to them, really hearing them, validating what they're feeling or are concerned with, and responding to those concerns perhaps that they've been through. And obviously, when somebody feels like they matter, when that vulnerability moment leads to them feeling like they matter to you, it's the productivity level, the relationships, all the dials that we want to see turn in the right direction as a result of that person saying, they know I'm a human being. They know that I matter. I count to them. It's huge benefit of empathy.
Well, it's something that we learn extremely early. I remember the story of the mom's talking to the little kid, and the kid says, Mom, you know what the meanest word in the world is? Mom's fearful, right? She goes, no, what is the meanest word in the world? And the kid says, uh-huh.
Ouch.
So even a 3 or 4-year-old knows that when they're talking to mom and mom's going, uh-huh, uh-huh, they're not present, they're not hearing you, they're not empathetic, there's no connection. Right. So even a little child knows when it's not present.
Yeah. You're not even listening. You're not even listening. Okay. Well, I see lots of upside of empathy, obviously. I mean, there are huge advantages to practicing empathy.
So what's the downside?
Well, like any skill, like any practice, like anything that we can take and make good, it can be corrupted too. So our friend Aaron Gray, a fellow coach, smart guy that you and I both know, he's often reminded me of an ancient Jewish proverb that says, "Faithful are the wounds of a friend." Faithful are the wounds of a friend. So there's um, there's a part of us that might be tempted to just immediately give somebody comfort because we empathize with a terrible thing they're going through, but really for their long-term interests, it's better for them to continue in that pain. And I'll give you a very simple example. I remember when my oldest was 1 year old, because it's not plural, it's one.
Yes, singular.
She's a 1-year-old kid. And the doctor at her physical wanted to draw blood. He saw some concerns and wanted to draw blood, a lot of blood. And my job as the dad was to take her shoulders and pin them back to the hospital bed. And the nurse and the doctor drew out vial after vial of blood from her arm. They pinned her arm down. I pinned her shoulders down. She cried so much and fought me so much and stared into my eyes pleading, and obviously couldn't talk, but cried so much that she couldn't cry anymore. Like you just heard like a gurgle in the back of her throat. I mean, it never let up the entire time that she was experiencing it. Not for a second, as much empathy as I felt, but not for a second would I have ever lifted up on her shoulders and told the doctor to go away. right? This is super important. I empathized, but I didn't give in to the empathy and say, oh, well, let's let you out of this tough situation. For her long-term good, it was best that she go through that.
Hmm. Well, I think we see that, in looking at in business where the leader, the coach, won't tell the employee what they need to hear.
Yeah.
And so yeah, the danger is, yeah, this person's on the wrong path, that this is not going to end well for them, and yet I'm fearful of doing the like you did, the uncomfortable and hard part, and having the breakthrough conversation,
Yeah.
that may help that person. And so,
Yeah.
I've heard this a long time ago, that clarity is kindness. So,
Mm,
and unclarity is unkind.
yeah.
So even though it may be difficult to have this conversation, and it's not something that you would willingly enter into, it's what's needed, and it's what's for the long-term good. And when I hear your
Yeah.
story, that's what I'm thinking. For the
Yeah.
long-term health of your child, you had to do something that was difficult. And
I once had a business owner that I worked for complaining yet again about a key employee, a key manager. And, just this had gone on for so long. And I felt like, I needed to do my job. And I said, if this is bothering you that much and he is that much of a problem, why is he still here? And there was this long pause. And he looked out the window, like just so thoughtful, looking up into the clouds. He said, Mark, it changes you when you see a grown man cry. And that was the end of the discussion. He was never removed. He was never dealt with. He was never given a chance to really, get what you said and get some clarity. He just was allowed to bumble through until the business was eventually sold. And now tell me how empathetic that was to, for the short term of this one employee, basically ignored until it essentially shut down an entire organization and all the employees underneath. That's not empathetic. It's
no,
not
no,
truly empathetic. So there's a downside to that.
yeah, but it is an incredible job retention strategy that I had
Right.
before. Yeah. The boss wants to have a tough talk with me. Yeah, work up some water.
Time to go chop some onions.
Yeah, work up some water here. Well, this is fascinating. So there's a lot of stories woven through here. So what's the key to this whole thing?
Well, I will say I'm a bigger fan of the word compassion. I think empathy, if you just stay with feeling other people's feelings, all these downsides that we talked about are possibilities, and frankly, you'll get exhausted. It will not go well. But there is something you can do with that empathy, which is to suffer, because that's what compassion actually means. We've talked about this a little bit. Mel Gibson's movie, The Passion of the Christ, if that's your reference point. It was rated R because they backed off some of the gore. There's a lot of suffering in that movie. It's about the passion of the Christ, and lots of suffering that he went through. And of course, it's a word used in Scripture. There's a place in Matthew where Jesus had compassion on the crowds. I think it says because they were like sheep without a shepherd. He was suffering with them, and then goes on to help the crowd. Right. So the helping is the key part here. He didn't just go, "Oh, that would be awful. I can feel what you're feeling. That would be awful." You have to take a step and suffer. So if I can use a old pagan example, I'm going to share something with you here.
I love old pagans.
Right.
Yeah. Dumbledore, Gandalf, all the classics.
Well, how about Achilles?
Oh yeah,
So
I liked Achilles too.
why not? He's such a heel, but
Oh,
yeah.
oh,
You see what I did there?
that joke sprained me.
Shameful. Let me see if I can you see this?
Yeah, it looks fantastic.
For those at home that can see this, read that first paragraph if you don't mind, and I'll read the second one. Whoops.
All right, this is from the Iliad, and I'm stalling till the slide comes back.
Oh man, that was painful. Give me a second here.
Well, that's you can tell it's real.
Yeah, that's right. We're authentic.
Yeah,
I
we're
hope people
authentic.
empathize with us.
Yeah, we'll edit that out in post.
Will we?
Yeah, no, we won't. It says, and I quote, "I come now to the ships to beg his corpse from you, bringing a princely ransom. Respect the gods, Achilles, and show mercy towards me. Remembering your own father, for I am more to be pitied than he, since I have brought myself to do what no other man on earth would do. I have lifted my lips to the hand of the man who killed my sons."
So we have this king, King Priam, who has come to Achilles, snuck through enemy lines to get to Achilles' tent. Achilles has killed his son and has frankly been abusing the corpse, dragging it around behind his chariot and so forth. And, you know, the words there, all these words, and it basically boils down to, you know that you're going to die young and your dad's going to have to bury you. Have some compassion on me for the fact that I have to bury my son, right? And so then we get this moving second paragraph. His words, King Priam's words that you just read, had moved Achilles to tears at the thought of his own father, and taking the old man's hands, he set him gently from him, while both were lost in memory. Priam, remembering man-killing Hector, his son, and wept aloud at Achilles' feet, while Achilles wept for his father Peleus and for Patroclus, his friend who had died once more, and the sound of their lament filled the hut. So I only share that basically because it's just, it's such a great story of getting somebody to connect with an awful feeling you're having, and it leads to tears. But of course, what I didn't show on the screen is all the stuff that happened afterwards. Achilles gave up his revenge and gave the body back. He, he took care of the king while he was in his tent and fed him a meal. And in fact, they even had a chance to sort of admire one another and have a sort of a bonding moment. None of that story would be all that powerful if there wasn't a break on Achilles' part, that, you know, he relented, you know, he suffered. And I think that's where we're headed with this. Dare I say that's maybe a transition point to talk about, even though that was ancient times, talking about, practically speaking, today, can we go beyond empathy to suffer with people a little bit, have compassion with people a little bit?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think as soon as you say suffer, I immediately go, "Ooh, don't want none of that." You know,
Right.
but I'm thinking of a story that happened just last week where we're still in the midst of the pandemic and it's mandatory masks. And I was meeting with a group of managers, and another manager walked in, and he's got his mask on plus surgical gloves.
Whoa.
I'm like, and of course, the managers, being guys, they immediately started making fun of him and said, "What are you checking prostates out there? What are you doing?" Right? The manager pulls his gloves off and he said, "No," he says, "I greeted this customer and they were masked. I was masked, but I also noticed that they were wearing gloves. And so we've got gloves sitting all around. So I immediately, when it was convenient as possible, as quickly as possible, I put on gloves as well. And gloves are sweaty and they're not comfortable, and he doesn't like them. So his suffering was minor, but it was his empathy and then the movement to compassion. Right, this customer is obviously at a different level of concern.
Right.
Their environment, they've taken this extra step. I'm going to mirror that extra step to make them feel comfortable as well. And so the suffering
That's
was
a
minute,
beautiful example.
but it was there. You know.
Yeah. Even suffering the attacks from his coworkers, frankly.
Yeah, he knew that. Yeah, he was going to get some ribbing, some good-natured ribbing from the team for walking around looking like like Dr. Frankenstein.
And I'm going to take a wild guess. He sold a car.
Yes, the customer was comfortable enough to stick around long enough to change their transportation choices and purchase them from that particular store.
I rest my case.
Boom. That's all you got to do. All right. You got to be present, figure out where the other person is, feel that inside of you, putting yourself in their shoes, and then have the courage to act, right?
Yeah.
Take that step, whatever that suffering might be, whether it's to put on a mask because they're wearing a mask, put on the gloves, to understand that the mom who's she's not mad her car's not done, she's mad that that she can't pick up her kids at daycare on time.
Right.
It always freaks them out if she's late. And figuring out, okay, what can I do from a compassion standpoint to alleviate the suffering that's in front of you.
One last thing, and then I'm going to shut up, and that is we try to give something for managers and coworkers and subordinates and so on. And in this case, maybe it's just connecting with the fact, Mr. Manager, Miss Manager, that at one point you too were an employee and you remembered what it was like to have unclear direction, to not know the why behind something that you're doing, to not have enough training, to not have enough resources, and getting into your people's shoes to see what it is that's possibly causing problems for them is a chance for you to then be compassionate and reach out. And it's probably going to cause you to be more patient, to slow down, to do things you don't want to do today. I just about guarantee it. But it might be the thing that connects with that other person, allows you to connect with their vulnerability. And you've just built a bond. I mean, if we want to talk about, what you get out of it, they're a better employee, right? Mm-hmm. So this works for customers and employees.
Yeah, I just had that example this past week. Brand new manager, been selling for years, 2 weeks into management. And I talked to his boss and I said, all right, so how's he doing? He said, he's already forgotten what it was like to be a salesperson. You've been a manager for 2 weeks. How can he have forgotten? And the guy goes, no, he's forgotten it. So during my one-on-one coaching, I just asked this simple question. I said, all right, think back to when you were a salesman 14 days ago. What did you dislike most about some of the managers that you worked with? And he was like, resistance, when they resisted my ideas, when they resisted, and he just went on and on. I said, all right, so here's your coaching tip. Don't be that guy. Don't be the guy that you hated. Don't be the guy that frustrated you. Be the opposite manager.
Yeah.
It's like, I get it. You don't have to be 20 years removed from the position that you're leading. Right? He was 2 weeks.
Oh, I love that.
He's already forgotten everything about it. So yeah, time is not a factor here. It's just, it can happen to anybody.
Perfect. Well, good note to end on. Lots of opportunities for all of us to go beyond empathy and take action and suffer with somebody.
Definitely. So let's hear what our announcer has to say.
And that's it. Join us next time when you'll hear Mike say, well, I'm sure he'll say something pithy. Don't miss it. Next time, it doesn't take a genius.
That's good enough.